Today I'm rating the Ravel editions that I own, the actual physical printed sheet music, not the pieces themselves. A very niche tier list, I know, but this is for my students who apparently hear me talk about edition differences and Ravel often enough, and it happens to be Ravel's 150th soon. Please note that opinions are my own. I was not paid for this. I performed a lot of Ravel's works and wrote my thesis on him, so I have a bunch of editions as part of my research, and I conveniently worked at a print music store back then, so this was a good amount of paychecks. Okay. Durand edition, the older versions. I like the paper color and quality, thick enough so you can write on it and erase without ripping through the page. For Le Tombeau de Couperin, I like that they kept the cover of the first print edition that he designed. Easy to read for font and layout. Spacing is okay. Stays open on a music stand. I'm not sure why Ravel's transcription for 2 pianos is thinner, but it is. Although Ravel published under Durand originally, some works have printing or editorial errors here and there, some fixed in reprint, some not. That said, I'm still keeping it within the A category because that's who Ravel worked with and I like the paper, but knocking it down to an A- for inconsistencies. Durand, this one is the Oeuvres pour piano. It says the original edition. In the back, quote, "The original engravings are reproduced, giving musicians a valuable record of how these major works were first published," end quote. In other words, be on the lookout for errors. The paper color is okay, thicker paper, but also feels rougher. I don't love the font choice. Legibility is fine, but I'm not sure. It just seems kind of out of place in this context. Maybe it's the juxtaposition of old and new fonts. The spacing of expression and rehearsal markings isn't great, and although the printing is darker, so that part's better, it's somehow it's not pixelated. But for example, the beams should be straight here, but they seem to be a bit zigzag printed. It is a struggle to keep this book open on its own without more books or clips, but if you want a collection in one book for a comparatively cheaper price, it would suffice. For the price point, I'll say a B-. Durand editions, the new version of solo works. I don't own the new version, so I won't officially rank them, but I'm not a fan of their covers. There's something nice about this simple, easy-to-identify design that I prefer from the older printing. I'm mentioning it in case you order a Durand and suddenly see a different cover. Schirmer. There is no identifying information about the source. Apart from printed in the USA, there's nothing else written, so definitely one to double check against other editions. The paper is not as rough as the Durand collection. It stays open well enough, and it's on the cheaper end of scores. It's a brighter paper than I normally like, but somehow works. Maybe it's because it's all I could afford when I started out and spent probably hundreds of hours at the library comparing notes, so I kind of got used to it. Despite its faults, I kind of don't mind it and like the paper, so we'll call it a B for nostalgia and price. Dover. This is another reprint of some Durand Eschig editions. In the note here it says, quote, "Obvious errors in the notation have been tacitly corrected," end quote. The only information is what you see here. This paper is much thinner than the others, but durable enough to scribble on. When I say scribble, I mean with pencil or pencil crayons, no pens or markers, because you can already see through it. It's a smoother paper, and color is fine. It sort of can stay open, depending on where it is, but also not. Since this is another reprint, but I prefer these fonts over the Durand collection titles, it's a B. Dover miniature scores. Mini scores of orchestral works are fun, useful if you're score studying or bringing it to watch some rehearsals. Printing quality could be better. Some pages aren't bad, others a tad grainy. Considering its tiny font, it's not terrible. Off-white paper, easy enough to scribble into. Since I use these to read from and not play through, it serves its purpose, so I'll give it a solid B. Henle edition. Henle editions I find very reliable. They're usually thorough with preface and comments. They also sometimes have a blog post with their process, which is informative and pretty neat. Here's one on their Concerto in G, which was newly published, I think, last year. So that's exciting. There are previews on their website if you want to compare layouts with other editions, which is convenient. One thing I love about the Ravel Henle editions in particular is that they're huge. Just look at the size difference between these scores. All the other Ravel editions I own are the same paper size. This one allows more space to breathe with how dense the music is. Visually, it's easier to line up between hands and subdivide. I often scribble research notes in margins, so this is useful to avoid it looking overcrowded. I like the paper color, print quality is good, and it stays open and flat, always a bonus. I like the paper texture, it's not glossy or anything, it's not super smooth, but it's not rough either. It's easy to write on and erase, although it's not very thick paper. I will say you are paying for it because it's one of the more expensive editions. I usually wait for sales, which happen once or twice a year, at least in Canada it does. I like that they're consistent with their color scheme. You can definitely tell it's a Henle from a mile away. For me, this is a very easy S tier. Peter's edition. These Urtext editions are by Roger Nichols. If you do any Ravel research, you'll have come across Roger Nichols' name. His biography on Ravel is definitely a go-to recommendation. His work here is no exception. There's his editorial method and sources, primary, secondary, preface, of course, and at the back there's critical commentary. Some choices he's made with legibility or ease of reading through in mind, but that might differ with what you're used to. For example, measure 19 of Le Gibet from Gaspard de la Nuit, he has edited it to one staff with main gauche, main droite. Durand edition has it split. I prefer the split, that's just what I'm comfortable with reading at this point, but these are little details to watch out for preference. There are some things Nichols catches that others don't, like in measure 36 of the same piece, we've got some music math discrepancies for inner voices. We've switched back to 4/4 time here, so these inner voices should total 8/8 for these stem up notes. Beat 4 should be eighths here, not quarters. So if you're going for the finer details, keep this in mind. That said, I unfortunately don't like the paper quality. It is thicker paper, which is nice, but it feels a lot rougher in texture. It's also brighter than the others. Maybe I'm just used to yellowing pages, but I really can't stare at it for a long time. For the pieces with more pages, it also doesn't stay open in a nicer kind of way either. For information, it is definitely S tier, but for paper and different preferences for notation in terms of hand splitting, etc., I'd say that's an A-, so we'll call this a solid A. I don't have the physical Alfred or Bärenreiter editions on me, so these last two won't be officially ranked. For Alfred editions, I think for me there's a limit on how much text I can work with before getting too overwhelmed. I prefer cleaner copies that I write things in rather than everything printed already because I'll inevitably write even more. That said, the information from the Alfred edition with this editor is good to read through if you're looking for more readily available suggestions explained in footnotes directly on the page. As for Bärenreiter, I'll use this WC to show you. The covers are always nice colors, the paper color is good, but even though the print quality and size of writing is bigger, I'm not huge on the layout. It feels more cramped somehow. The physical page is wider, but the length of it is the same as the others. Perhaps it's font choice, but for some reason I don't connect to it as much. The paper texture isn't consistent between editions I own, but in terms of go-to editions, they're pretty consistent for a lot of works. Regardless of the edition you choose, I always recommend cross-checking and cross-referencing to ensure that you have the correct notation because typos happen. Work within your means, work with what you have. Do I still use my $4 Costco find? Absolutely. Will I have compared available editions note by note, then copied out relevant information from the more reliable sources into what I'm using? You bet. If you're still unsure of editions in general, you can check recommendations within conservatory or course syllabi. Some competitions might have their preferred listings as well. If there isn't a print music shop near you, libraries are a great resource, and universities with music programs often have sections of scores available. Secondhand bookshops or library sales might carry some as well. There's also IMSLP, depending on copyright status, to double-check your scores. This is not my edition ranking across all composers. It really depends on what's available and who to source, but definitely do your research. All right, here's the final list. If you made it this far, thank you for joining me in this little nerding out of music scores. If you'd like to support this channel, I have 3 albums currently available to buy or stream. If you're looking for music resources such as this music theory zine or more ways to contribute, there are links in the description. As always, thanks for watching and happy music making.